This next book is about dinosaurs. This book I actually used to have when I was a little kid. Diplodocus. There's all sorts of different names for the different long necks, huh? Got a lot of them. Got Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus, Diplodocus. Oh look, Diplodocus, Pterodon, woolly mammoth, Allosaurus, Hyphocephalodon, Ichthyosaurus. Oh wow, this one's... Hold on a minute. This is gonna be a long story. Oh, it actually did start there. Okay. The herd of Diplodocus had grown large. There had always been enough food for all. Each year, the youngsters had stayed with the herd. Now things were different. Food had become scarce. Neither old nor young Diplodocus had enough to eat. Some older members of the herd guarded the little food which was left. They rationed it out carefully. The creatures were allowed to feed early before the sun came up. Then they sought the meager shelter of the bare stems of one of the old trees. The Diplodocus had other problems. They had to protect their food from the other plant eaters like Brontosaurus and Brachiosaurus. Hey, we just talked about them. Several older members of the herd were on duty guarding the plants when they were disturbed by a noise behind them. They were cracking branches and general rumpus. The Diplodocus let out their customary warning call. The advance continued. Large shapes appeared in the undergrowth all around. Allosaurus had appeared on all sides. The Diplodocus knew what it meant. They let forth cries for help as the intruders moved closer. The shrieks from the startled Diplodocus spread far and wide. Some herd members were sleeping, others resting, and some time before the terrified cries reached all the members. The young Diplodocus had never been summoned like this before. As they saw other members of the herd move, they followed them. Soon dozens of old and young were coming from all directions. Increasing cries for help still came thick and fast from somewhere among the mass of dying vegetation. The first arrivals saw strange and unfamiliar shapes in front of them. They stopped in their tracks. Most had never come across a situation before. They had watched single members of the herd being attacked. They had never seen so many large creatures. Panic cries came from Diplodocus guarding the food supply. As other Diplodocus arrived at the scene of the activity, they too slowly came to a halt. The Allosaurus remained immobile too. The herd of Diplodocus was not sure what the next move was. The cries ceased. Diplodocus and their enemies faced each other. The silence was intense. The quiet was broken when, in the distance, as a Brachiosaurus called loudly to its mates. Then, without any kind of signal, the Allosaurus advanced. They charged toward Diplodocus, guarding the trees. For a moment, there was utter confusion. The old Diplodocus stood their ground, letting cries of anguish. The rest of the herd seemed uncertain. Some stayed where they were, others backed away. Cries turned to terror as the Allosaurus attacked. Sharp teeth and claws sank into Diplodocus' leathery skins. There was no hope. The old Diplodocus was no match for their attackers. Each of the onlookers realized this. A few stayed to watch. Most fled away into the withered vegetation, their long necks poking out from the horsetails and ferns. The herd split up. Some groups went one way, some another. Each continued on their slow lumbering way with hardly backward glance. Ooh. Normally Diplodocus didn't have to move far. Today was different. If they were going to survive, they would have to go a long way away. Instinct told them that once the Allosaurus had finished off the old Diplodocus, they would look for other members of the herd. They plodded clumsily on their way. In their haste, they scattered numbers of small mammals feeding on the ground. A group of younger Diplodocus stayed together. A young female stopped for breath. She had never been so far in her life. She called out. It was a call for help. Most of them didn't. Bless me. Thank you. Most of them didn't seem to hear her call and continued on their way. However, one young male Diplodocus did stop. He turned around to gaze at the frightened creature. He moved toward her, glad to help one of his kind. They communicated as the young male Diplodocus was soon aware of the female's problems. As they rested, The young dinosaur was ever on alert for danger. Ooh, a long one. Okay. Scooch a little bit. After a while, they moved forward slowly. Both were hungry. The Diplodocus searched until they found a few shriveled leaves. They shared them. The older of the two made sure that the younger one had food to eat. The male Diplodocus didn't recognize the area. There were no landmarks that he knew. The juvenile Diplodocus sensed a note of alarm in the older male's manner. She wasn't sure what it meant. The two dinosaurs trudged slowly onward. The male paused now and then to try to get a bearing. He made continuous calls, listening anxiously for a reply. There was none. He had never been alone on his own before, and fear overcame him. In unfamiliar territory, he was ever on lookout for enemies. The earlier events were still vivid in his memory. With the sun high overhead, it was very hot. The male Diplodocus signaled to his female companion that they must soon try to find shelter. They were hungry and thirsty, conscious of the hot sun beating down on their leathery skins. Suddenly, a short distance in front of them, the older Diplodocus saw a rock. He approached it with caution. A small lizard scampered away in the undergrowth, and it startled him. He indicated to the female Diplodocus to stay where she was. He thoroughly surveyed the rock, but there was no sign of life. He turned to the female Diplodocus, urging her to come toward the overhang ledge. With room for both to shelter, they stood very still, glad of time to rest. Eventually, the temperature dropped, and the two hungry creatures moved on. The male Diplodocus led the way. They searched every bush for food. They found a leaf here and there, and even nibbled at the rough branches. The older Diplodocus, sniffed the air. Suddenly, he caught the smell of conifers, which drifted toward his nostrils. He headed eagerly in the direction of the scent, moving more quickly than he had done since escaping from the Allosaurus. The female stayed close behind. The male's pace quickened, the female finding it difficult to keep up. In front of them, a whole plantation of lush vegetation came into view. Both creatures ate more than their fill, and then wandered lazily to a nearby rock to rest. The male dinosaur was awakened by faint sounds. He recognized them. They were from his own kind. He woke his younger companion. Both creatures called back in unison. Soon the area was echoing with the sounds of many Diplodocus. After wandering far and wide, they had arrived in the same place. There was plenty of food for all in the area, which young dinosaurs had found first. Oh, I guess that's the end. Interesting facts about the Diplodocus. The body was one of the largest of any dinosaur so far discovered. Neck had long bones which overlapped. This made their neck stronger. The neck was long and thin. Head was small with the brain the size of a kitten's. There were small thin teeth only in the front part of their jaws. There was a small hole above the eyes. This was the nostril. Legs. At the front were shorter than the hind ones. The latter had special muscles to help the creature move easily. This probably helped the dinosaur to sit up and feed on trees. The middle tail bones had skids on them. This stopped the blood vessels from being damaged when the tail dragged along the ground. It was a total length of 91 feet. Its tail was 45 feet. It weighed 11.5 tons. Wow, look at the size of the skeleton compared to the human. That's the almost human. And look at this. We have the Brachiosaurus, the Diplodocus, and the Apatosaurus, or Brontosaurus. See, look at that. I didn't even know that they were the same thing. Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus are the same thing. That's pretty good. And that's it. Well, I think I'm going to be going to bed here soon, so love you guys. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get something situated where I can actually see you. I don't think your mom means ill. I just think she's influenced by her mother and family too much. But that's a discussion for another day. Alright, well, I love you guys. I want to see you so bad. I miss you. I love you guys. países by Neo.